Hey guys, it's Corey from Redefining Strength. Welcome to the Fitness Hacks Podcast. Today I want to talk about really listening to your body, meeting yourself where you're at. Because so often when we want to see a new and better result, we go to extremes. We force ourselves into these extremely restrictive diets. We do these extreme workout plans, and then we wonder why nothing works. So in this episode, I really want to focus on better ways to meet yourself where you're at. And I'm super excited for Michelle to share some great tips to help you eat more intuitively, learn how to listen to those hunger cues, all the different types of hunger cues, and make sure that you're actually addressing what you need to move forward in a positive and a sustainable way. So let's jump right in. Have you ever thought that it's way harder to adjust your diet than it is to adjust your workouts? Like even thought like, I can work out all day, I can make any changes I need to my training, but I just can't seem to dial in my nutrition? Well, I can tell you, I personally have been there. And in talking to Michelle, which I'm super excited to get into our episode shortly, our segment of the episode shortly, but in talking to her, I was thinking about this, like, why is it so much more challenging to make those changes to our diet than it is to make them to our workouts? And I think part of that is we're a lot more comfortable being uncomfortable with our training. There's also a feeling of success with our training, right? When you go train, you feel like you worked hard. There's something that feels like you're moving forward with it. So there's that instant gratification or instant payoff from it, even though we don't necessarily see the changes right away, but there's a feeling that it will pay off. Versus with our nutrition, when you eat one healthy meal, there isn't fully that feeling that it will pay off. Sometimes you're even like, I didn't want this right now, right? Not to mention, as Michelle brings up, there's a lot more opportunities for failure with that. If you do your workout for the day, you checked it off, right? But each meal we do, each time we want to go snack when we shouldn't, each time we have that emotional response when we want to reach for something, those are all chances in a weird way for us to fail, which can make it a lot harder to make those changes. I also think it's that we don't meet ourselves where we're at. A lot of the times we do enjoy the training, or we can find things that fit our schedule, or we can find forms of movement that we enjoy. Versus a lot of times we try and force these arbitrary restrictive standards when it comes to our nutrition. We try and force ourselves into someone else's version of what's clean. And that ultimately sabotages us from truly addressing what we need and listening to our body while assessing our lifestyle. So I think it's key we think about how we're truly making changes and even the other elements there are to nutrition. With working out, that can even be social, right? We can have a community we go to work out with. We can have people that we, commiserate about our training for our triathlon with, right? There's a community there that can even promote us wanting to do the workouts. Versus a lot of times in terms of our nutrition, the community actually promotes us not doing the things we should, right? A lot of times food is social, but those social gatherings revolve around not so macro-friendly meals or cocktails or different things like that. So the celebration almost sidetracks us or threads to derail us more than it does promoting those optimal habits. And I think assessing that and assessing our balance and assessing all the reasons why we're consuming food outside of just food as fuel is super important if we want to create those sustainable new habits and results. And that's why I'm super excited for Michelle to dive into how to eat more intuitively, because this process really is learned. But in learning to listen to our hunger cues and learning to listen to ourselves and our needs, our goals, both mentally and physically, we can better meet ourselves where we're at, but we can still be working towards a goal as we're making these small and sustainable changes. And I think it's even important that we realize that in being intuitive with this is also learning when we might mentally try and sabotage ourselves, when some of our old habits don't promote us doing the things that we need, and when we have to retrain how we think about things, how we view things, how we even implement different tactics to move forward. I'm super excited to be joined by Michelle today to talk about eating what you want, adding what you need, so that you can really approach nutrition from a perspective of addition versus subtraction. So thank you, Michelle, for joining me. I'm super excited to talk about nutrition by addition, which I love that term. So thank you for bringing that into my life.
Of course. Yeah. Happy to do that.
So let's talk about what this really means, nutrition by addition.
So often when it comes to people wanting to improve their diet, the very first thing they think of is, I need to cut this out, or I need to cut some of my favorite foods out because I eat way too much of it and I know that's a problem. That can be really detrimental for your mental health and also the longevity of the process. Because one of the things that I always have to explain to people is hunger. There's more types of hunger than just one, and that being your physical need. There's more than just the physical need that drives us to eat. There's also that emotional and satisfaction hunger too that we want to make sure that we are honoring. And the big thing when it comes to nutrition by addition is if you are actually, instead of focusing on all the foods you can't have, but actually focusing on all the foods you want to add to your diet, is really changing up that perspective, and kind of having that mind shift. So that's really why I like the phrase eat what you want, add what you need. And because it does kind of come into play with like the intuitive eating process. And I know I'm going to ruffle some feathers because I do believe that you can eat intuitively with a health goal in mind. And I know some people say that those two can't exist at the same time, but I'm here to tell you, I think there is a middle ground and they can work very well hand in hand. So the big thing when it comes to eat what you want is I want, like, you're actually honoring that emotional drive to eat, or that, those emotional cravings, that satisfactory craving where you're like, I really want, mac and cheese today, or I really want that slice of pizza. Well, you know that you can have that, but you also know it's probably going to be lacking in protein, probably some fiber. And we want to make sure that we're adding to your meal. So instead of saying, I really want mac and cheese, but I'm not going to eat it because I know that's not going to get me closer to my goal. Eat it, have it, put it on your plate, but add some extra protein. So whether that's going to be chicken or even adding nutritional yeast into your mac and cheese as you're making it, and having a salad or some type of veggie on the side is going to make your meal not only more satisfactory, more well balanced, but now you've also satisfied that emotional component and actually made your meal more satisfactory in the long run.
I think it's so key we do recognize what we want in terms of foods and the other hunger cues or reasons we're hungry, as you mentioned, because we hear so often like food is just fuel. And I'm sorry, but food is not just fuel anymore in our modern society. Food is celebration. Food is tied to memories. Like, I can tell you, I refuse to go out to Palm Springs for a trip and not go to Casuelos with Ryan. Like, that is something that we do every single time. Could I not? Yes. Am I actually hungry for the entire plate of food that I eat there? No, but that is part of the tradition. And for me, it's worth working in. So it's adding in that, but then also striking my balance around those things. So as you mentioned, like, potentially it is working in healthy or other foods to hit your macros into a meal, or even just working in that meal and then building the rest of your week, the rest of your month, the rest of your year around the things that are important to you as well, the celebrations that matter. It's not just only that meal that we're looking at, but everything, to find that balance, because food is more than just fuel, and it's okay to embrace that now.
Yeah, I've had so many clients tell me, like, chips are my trigger food. I can't have chips around. Well, I was like, well, is there really ever going to be a time where you don't ever see chips, whether you're at an event or the grocery store and you have that really big draw, and people will say, like, in a moment of weakness, I bought chips. And it's not a moment of weakness. If that's your one of your favorite foods, and you're cutting out your favorite food, like, yeah, you're going to leave a gaping hole where the drive to consume it is going to be higher. So when you're focusing on, like, you tell someone, don't think of a pink elephant. Everyone's thinking of a pink elephant. When you tell someone, don't eat chips, their thoughts are pretty soon going to be consumed by all things chips. So really what I've done a lot with clients, and what I really like to do with anyone that I'm working with, is if you have a favorite food and you're like, I have to stay away from it. Chips are my trigger. I just can't buy them. But then they buy them, and pretty soon they're like, I was so bad, I ate an entire bag of chips in one sitting, a family-sized bag of chips, one sitting. Well, you're getting into that binge restrict cycle, which can have very negative effects on your overall journey, versus, hey, you want chips? Let's add chips in daily. Let's put it on the side. Let's make it so it's not something you can't have, and you're going to be able to have it again. So it's not being put on this pedestal where all of a sudden you feel like you don't have control around it, because you think if you have one, we always say that all or nothing mindset, where if you have one, all of a sudden you've ruined your day and you might as well just eat as much as you can because you're just going to start tomorrow. Instead, we're going to actually kind of control that portion. And that's the big thing when it comes to eat what you want, add what you need. And I've said this before, but there are no bad foods. You can make any of your favorite foods fit in your diet. The issue is portion sizes. So there's no bad foods, but there are poor portion sizes. And we really just want to make sure that we are consuming foods a little bit more well-balanced. So focusing on that, all three main macros. So your protein, carbs, and fat. If you have chips, you have your carb. So now we need to focus on a protein and fat to kind of round out that meal, or even round out a snack.
And I think in terms of triggers, it's even important we recognize that, hey, there are certain mindsets we have around foods. Like, I know if I get that pint of Ben & Jerry's, I want the entire pint. I don't want to just have a serving. So instead of like saying I can't have it, I'll be like, okay, well, either I'm going to include this when I can have that, or I'm going to even find a swap for other days so that I have that balance that is that replacement so that I'm not depriving myself of the food. So like with chips, if you find there's a specific chip that you're like, I want more than the one portion I should have, so therefore I know I'm not going to just have that. Well, what other replacement can you even add in that helps satisfy that craving so that you're choosing to make a different decision with that, but you're not allowing yourself to want to have the other things? It's like recognizing that so much of this is our choice too, and how we approach the changes we're making to deal with foods that have been trigger foods that we eat for reasons other than just hunger.
And that, the big concept with intuitive eating, which I know I'm going to ruffle some feathers saying that you can eat intuitively with a health goal in mind. But one of the big things that kind of occurs with intuitive eating is people are like, well, I'm going to eat what I feel like it. I'm going to eat to my hunger. I'm going to stop eating when I'm full. And those are all great things. I want people to be able to do that. But the truth is most of us, we have ignored our hunger cues for so long that we are truly deaf to our internal cueing. So it's not so much that, but actually, again, eating towards your health goal, eating towards what that goal is. What do you know is actually going to take you closer to what your end goal is? And recognizing that you can still have enjoyment. This does not mean that every single meal is chicken, rice, and broccoli, which I know is like the dieting staple. And don't get me wrong, I like chicken, rice, and broccoli, but you can get bored of it rather quickly. So the big benefit here is when we are actually consuming those foods that we want, you actually get more enjoyment out of that food. And when you get the higher enjoyment and that higher enjoyment level, you can actually lead to greater satisfaction in the long run. And this can actually help you stay in a caloric deficit because you are truly satisfied. How many people have been guilty of saying, oh, I want to stay away from the pint of Ben & Jerry's, so I'm going to go eat a handful of nuts. Well, I still want that pint of Jerry's, so I'm going to have another handful of nuts. I still want that pint of Jerry's, so I'm going to go eat some more nuts and, something else to try and fill that hole and keep my mouth busy and keep my hand out of that pint and Jerry's. But Ben & Jerry's. But in reality, we're actually over consuming calories by the end of the day and kicking ourselves out of that caloric deficit, where if we would have just been like, yeah, I'm going to enjoy my Ben & Jerry's, and I know I'm going to feel satisfied because I'm honoring that craving that I'm having.
It goes back to that feeling of like a lot of people come in saying, I eat so clean, why am I not seeing results? It's all about portions. And sometimes if you give yourself a little bit of what you want and you add in what you need, you do see better results faster, and you can retrain your body to even understand your hunger cues. But I even think with that, like, intuitive eating is learned. It's a learned behavior, one that we've often lost from early childhood because food has become so much more than just fuel in our life. But we have to recognize too that even when we've been tracking, and I've been tracking a very long time, there are days where even though I can probably eyeball the portions because I've done it so much, especially for foods I consume on a regular basis, that I know I am stressed or tired or don't want to care, or it's like the holidays, so I'll excuse other things, right? And all of a sudden, the internal cues, the wires get crossed because other things factor in, other emotions factor in. And so I think recognizing that even though once we've learned to listen to our body, we've learned to eat till we're full, there are going to be other things that can impact our response to things. So even intuitive eating, we sometimes need that little check-in with ourselves, that real clear reflection on what we're doing, because portions can get distorted by stress, by lack of sleep, by other things in our life.
And I think you really brought up an important part too, is we do get triggered to consume foods outside of hunger. And I call it the food holidays, where it's really, from October until actually pretty much Easter. So we're looking more into April, is where things are very food centered. And you're going to be surrounded by lots of opportunities to be able to be like, well, this is a unique situation. And again, it's not that you can't enjoy those parties, because I know a lot of people are going to have office parties, family parties, friend parties, all coming up over the next several months between Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Valentine's Day, all these many opportunities that we can have amazing dinner parties and dessert parties and all these things. But this is really where I think looking at your plate, being honest with yourself on what you actually want to consume, and then focusing on what your body actually needs at the time is really going to pay off. And you are going to be more satisfied and be able to stay closer to your goal, especially during these holidays.
It's really assessing who and what you are and the mindsets behind it. I think that's something we don't touch on enough, like with changes to our workouts, with our health goals, or like changes to our nutrition, is that so much of it relates back to the mindset behind it. If you're adding in healthy foods, you're going to want to eat more of those healthy foods that move you forward. Even if you're adding in some of the things during those holidays that maybe aren't as clean foods that other people might demonize or judge you for, right? We're finding our own balance that will ultimately keep us consistent for longer, because we'll feel that positivity, that momentum building. And the more you do in either a positive or negative direction. Just like sometimes we think, well, what's 5 minutes with a workout? But doing the 5 minutes keeps you in the habit. You still feel successful that you're doing it. So you want to think about, how can I build that mentality of success, that motivation in terms of taking action towards my goals, even if it is having the Easter candy that's really not any different than candy other times of years, but the marketing looks really pretty, so you really want it anyway. But adding that in as you add in, maybe more fruits or vegetables, knowing that you're going to have a dessert that's potentially not as nutrient dense as maybe your usual Greek yogurt parfait.
And I think it's important too to note, because I hear so often, I know I can do the workouts. I really need help nailing in my nutrition. And that it makes a lot of sense, because with a workout, and workouts are great. And of course we want to have challenging workouts. And, but when you do a workout, you get to check off, yep, I did it today. I'm very consistent with my workouts. Most people become more consistent with their workouts than they do their diet. And the reason is because you can check off that you did your workout once a day. But when it comes to food, how many opportunities do you have that you are being faced with food choices? And what is it going to take? And so that's really the reason why nutrition can be, some people can kind of struggle with, or feel like they're struggling with it so much, because you have a lot more opportunities and a lot more choices to make when it comes to your diet. And again, this is really why I just love this approach, because you can approach every moment with, are you eating what you want? Are you adding what you need? And if you break it down into that, and I know it's a simple message for a very complex subject, but if you can really break it down and actually have that approach every single time you're being confronted with food choices, that's going to, in the long run, really give you a head start and kind of a big leap forward in your progress and your journey, is really taking the time to consciously make those decisions, and not just, well, this is what I want, this is what I feel like, this is what I'm going to eat. Because most of the time, you're probably not going to actually be eating towards your health goal if you're not being conscious of what it is you're consuming.
It's all about those mindsets. A lot of us have an easier time training. I know I made that excuse for the longest time. Oh, well, I'll just train all day. I like food too much, right? And it's because we're comfortable being uncomfortable in the gym versus not comfortable being uncomfortable in dietary changes. So it's the mindset again with the working out. It's the fact too that I think with working out, you feel that satisfaction, or you feel the benefits, so to speak, from it, versus with our diet. It takes a lot longer sometimes for the health benefits to snowball, to feel that energy improve from the way you eat, to feel some of those changes, to feel your hunger cues return in a natural way, to be able to manage your portions, right? So it's embracing that by taking this perspective and assessing what you need, you can really change the mindset behind it, which allows you to stick with things long enough to see the results. Because adding what you want, or eating what you want and adding what you need, you're taking the approach of there's no restriction. And the less we feel restricted, the more we feel like we have agency and choice, the more we're going to be able to long-term understand better how our body needs to be fueled to see the results that we want. But we need that clear direction too, as you mentioned. It's not just, oh, I'll eat till I'm hungry. It's like, well, what's your focus for the foods that you're consuming? What are you trying to accomplish with this? Because eating to gain muscle is going to be different than eating to lose fat, or eating just to improve your health, or to improve your energy, or manage the symptoms of menopause.
Yeah. And it is just like you said, just taking a time to be like, okay, what is my goal? or even how am I going to feel after I consume this? Yeah, I really want that mac and cheese, but I know if I have an entire bowl of mac and cheese, I'm going to be hungrier in a few hours. Or I know if I have that entire bowl of mac and cheese, I may not be able to push it as hard as I would like in my workout or to be able to recover as quickly from a workout. So that's really, like you said, that's kind of those thoughts that you want to actually ask yourself is what actually is your goal? And most of us know that the improvements that we want for our diet, but how are you going to actually do that for every meal, every snack? What are those slight little tweaks you can make to that plate that's going to bring you closer?
I love that. Just wrapping it all up, it is really seeing how you can make your meals enjoyable while working towards that goal and changing your mindset of restriction to one of how can I add to this so that it feels sustainable for me?
Yeah. Just to add to that, we don't want to have diets that, and the reason why diets often fail is because become a source of stress. So this approach really just encourages you to find joy in your meals and kind of in nourishing your bodies that can lead to increased happiness and that long-term success.
So thank you so much, Michelle, for joining me. I want to hear how you all are going to make one addition to your meals today, this week, to really improve the quality of your nutrition without restricting the foods that you love. So going off of Michelle talking about making sure that you're getting what you need by nutrition through addition, I wanted to give some more tips to help you make those little swaps that can really add up. Because I think we can think, okay, this is great, nutrition by addition, and all of a sudden we go to make a different change with our meals and we're like, how do I do this, right? We get stuck looking at things in the way we've always looked at them. So talking about tips for nutrition by addition, I like to be like, first thing, how can I add a side to balance something out? So if I really want that dessert, if I really want that pizza, if I really want some main thing, how can I maybe adjust the portion of that, but then add in something else on the side that will even it out? So in terms of let's just say you want your chocolate. Maybe you have the chocolate on the side with some Greek yogurt, or maybe you make a Greek yogurt parfait by adding that chocolate in. If it's pizza night with the family, maybe you have that slice of pizza and say, okay, I'm gonna have a side salad with chicken. But first I like to say, how can I not change the main thing and work other sides around it, or even add in something else to another meal? So first focusing on how can I maintain this by working it in first and then working other things around it to create that balance. As I said, even taking a slightly smaller portion if you need, but still getting that thing in first, planning it in first, and then working sides in that meal or other meals around it. Then in terms of other ways to have nutrition by addition, what small swaps can you do that keep the recipe the same? So I say keep the recipe the same because this is going to look different for everybody. For me, most of the time, the cauliflower pizza crust does not taste like pizza still to me. Okay, I actually love some cauliflower pizza crust from Trader Joe's, but I don't use them as pizzas. And there are a few, different ones that do taste really good. But in general, I'm like, cauliflower rice is not real rice. It doesn't fully replace it for me. It really changes the taste of a dish. So I might not make that swap, but I know that I can add in cottage cheese to an enchilada bake and vary the fat content of the cottage cheese to hit my macros. And that makes it taste even better for me. It makes it taste cheesier. I know that with a burrito, a lot of times I can even swap in a lower carb tortilla, increase that fiber intake, something with chia and flax seeds, and it will still taste the same for me on a wrap, right? Or on a burrito. I know I can use Greek yogurt in certain dips to increase the protein of them over sour cream. So it's about finding little swaps to recipes that you can use to adjust your macros and add in flavor, add in different things that help you hit those macros or micronutrient intake, but that doesn't change the feel of the recipe. So you don't want to force, again, cauliflower rice if you're like, I hate cauliflower, even if it cuts your carbs, right? Because that's going to make you feel like you're subtracting, not adding. But you can think of the different ways that you can make adjustments. And I'd love for you guys to comment with some of your favorite ones to make. But if you do like cauliflower rice or in specifically stir fries, I love using half rice, half cauliflower rice because I bump my veggies. It can be more filling. It can be a bigger portion of food. And sometimes that larger volume of food can be very satisfying, but it doesn't change the taste because I still have the rice in there. So think about little swaps you can make to meals, whether or not it's adjusting portions or again, adding in cottage cheese to make something cheesier or replacing some of the other full fat cheese in there. But little swaps to recipes that keep them the same, keep you enjoying the meals because that ultimately helps you be more consistent, but adds in the micros or the macros that you need. Then even off of that, how can you hide things in different dishes? So a lot of times we think, okay, I need to increase my protein, so I'll add in another ounce of chicken, and you don't want to eat more chicken. But think about how you can hide it. If you're making a soup, try bone broth over vegetable broth. That's going to increase your protein intake, but it's going to do it in a way that you're not necessarily thinking I have to eat more protein, right? If you're replacing the chicken stock for that bone broth, you're increasing your protein, but in a very sustainable way where you're kind of hiding it. Or in a smoothie, can you add in a protein powder? Can you add in some greens or like vegetables to increase your micronutrient intake when you don't want to eat more vegetables? Can you, add in tofu to that smoothie to make it creamy, but bump your protein? Think about little ways you can hide things in dishes where you won't even notice that you've made that adjustment. And that can be adding in more micronutrients that you need. It can be helping you add in the protein that you need in a sustainable way. Even going back to like nutritional yeast, you can sprinkle that in cottage cheese and use it as a dip, bumps the protein, right? You can sprinkle that as a seasoning on your chicken, on your tofu, on your tempeh. And this can be a way to bump your protein, make things taste really good, hiding that extra few grams. And yes, it's only an extra few grams with some of these swaps, but all of those things add up and they make it more sustainable and they help us make adjustments that we can actually maintain. Because a lot of times we think we don't have the discipline, but it's really that we're forcing these habits that haven't become natural to us or that are so outside what we're currently doing that we have to use a lot of willpower right now. The more we can make something close to what we are doing currently, or even ingrain one thing at a time so we can really build the habit with it before we make other changes, the more that discipline is built. Okay, because it's not just given, it's built, and it's built by habits becoming unconsciously there because they're so easy to replicate because we've done them enough. So you want to think about different ways that you can hide things, different ways you can make swaps to current recipes, and even different ways you can just add a side dish or plan in the thing you want first and then work other meals around it. But the more we can make sure that we're addressing things that we enjoy, things that we crave, the less we're going to feel like we need to do something different or want to sabotage ourselves by going back to what we were doing previously. I'm a big believer in workout progressions, but with Michelle bringing up eating intuitively towards a goal, I wanted to discuss the nuance in using workout progressions and even working out intuitively towards a goal. So if we don't have a plan, we're setting ourselves up for failure. We're not going to be able to track our progress towards something. So I think having that clear workout progression, that weekly schedule that you repeat for multiple weeks is very important. Okay, but if we try and force ourselves to make sure that we're hitting the schedule week in and week out when there are other factors at play, we're not listening to our mind and body, and we could ultimately be holding ourselves back, reaching a point of diminishing returns, sabotaging our long-term adherence because we're forcing something that truly isn't sustainable that we don't have the motivation for over addressing what we need now. So I think there is a portion of working out where you have to be intuitive and listen to what your mind and body are telling you. And I say mind and body because often we think about adding in a deload week or backing off things or modifying our workouts because we have an injury or because we're sore or because we're tired or maybe because our schedule changed. We have to go to 3 days a week, right? So we have outside factors, whether they're physical or even like the schedule one that we have to address. But I think it's also really key we note that there is a mental component to it too. If you're super stressed out, if you've been pushing really hard as fast as you can, making more sacrifices towards a goal, that can mentally wear you down. If it's stress at work, whatever else. But if there are other stressors, at some point you might be like, I don't have the mental wherewithal to push in my workouts in the same way. And even that mindset shift can mean shifting your workouts so that you can do something still consistently. Because too often we try and force ourselves, willpower our way through when that ultimately ends up making us do nothing because we reach a point where we have no more self-control. And then we fall for a lot longer versus if we had just backed off. So no, you can't give in to every day you feel like, I don't want to do it, right? You can't just not work out. But at the same time, if you're constantly feeling like that and you're starting to note a pattern of hitting that mental fatigue, or you're trying to force something that isn't really realistic for your schedule, or it's not just the mental, but the physical, right? You feel like your body isn't seeing the forward progress that you want in your workouts. You're not able to lift more, do another rep, whatever else, progression. You want to adjust, right? Even if you're in the middle of that progression, if you notice something comes up where it's more realistic to meet yourself where you're at by adjusting, do it. Having a plan B in place can be really key. Even sometimes being like, hey, today just did get away from me. And yes, on my schedule, it is a 1 hour workout and it's a lower body, but you know what? I only have these tools at home. I'm going to do 20 minutes and lower body just to stay in the routine. You're still getting that work in. So it's also allowing yourself to meet yourself where you're at based on all the other needs to be a little bit more intuitive with it. So it's not that you can make an excuse all the time, right? We can't just use anything as an excuse not to do our routine. And that's why having that plan in place is key. But I think it's also important that we recognize we can't just constantly force ourselves to do something. Yes, at points we are going to be willing to make more sacrifices to push harder, like to go ahead faster and see those results faster. We're going to have more motivation. New Year's is a great example of that. But at the times we don't have that same motivation, that same time, that same whatever, that drive. we also need to recognize that it is okay to listen to our body and go to a plan B. And this is not just letting ourselves off the hook, because if you're noticing like, hey, this isn't just one day, this is multiple days, that's where you need to reassess your schedule and meet yourself where you're at, adapting your progression. So again, planning and changing those plans to meet you where you're at. There was actually a great, and now I'm going to forget who said this, but it was about sort of like plans are useless, but planning is essential. And the whole point of this is that the exact plan you implement might not be the plan that you actually have to run with. It might change. But in planning that plan out, you're going to assess where you're at right now. You're going to see a lot of pitfalls that might come up. You're going to give yourself opportunity to adjust based on what you need. So we need to have that clear plan to give us direction, to help us push forward when we don't feel like pushing forward. But then we also have to be realistic, assessing where we're at right now. So constantly reassessing, what's my current lifestyle? What's my stress level? What's my actual schedule? Where am I at mentally? Because that will allow us to adapt and adjust to be more consistent overall. Because too often we focus on this ideal over the 1% improvements, realizing the ebb and flow that's going to occur over the year. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of the Fitness Hacks Podcast. I hope you sort of have started to assess what you really need to move forward, because we can't just keep forcing ourselves into a mold that doesn't fit. We constantly need to be assessing our lifestyle, our needs, our goals to meet ourselves where we're at. And the more we can really do this assessment, the more we can be more intuitive in terms of how we need to design our lifestyle to really reach our goals. And even as we're trying to eat more intuitively, train more intuitively, listen to our mind, body, and even our soul, we also need to make sure that we're driving forward towards a goal, because without direction, we're just going to keep spinning our wheels and potentially not be pushing ourselves forward in the way we really want to see the results that we deserve.